The Temple Mount in Jerusalem has never been excavated, but an illegal construction project 20 years ago opened the door to some major discovery.
It would have been the night right after he was arrested. And
the Temple Mount has always held mysteries, stories of hidden rooms, forbidden tunnels, and lost relics buried deep beneath its foundation. Most believed these tales were symbolic, exaggerated, or impossible to verify. Until now. Right from the shadows of the Temple Mount, a recent, unexpected geological shift exposed an underground cavity no modern record had ever documented. What investigators found inside did not match any known era, language, or architectural style. And for the first time in decades, authorities have gone silent. But here's the question. Does this incredible find confirm the biblical narrative? Before we continue, hit the like and subscribe to follow what unfolds next. For centuries, the foundation of the Temple Mount has been considered immovable. An ancient platform carved from bedrock so dense and solid that even major earthquakes in the region left it largely untouched. That is why what happened just days ago has stunned both scientists and religious authorities. Shortly before sunrise, monitoring stations around Jerusalem recorded a brief, silent fluctuation beneath the mount. It was not a quake. No tremor was felt on the surface. Nothing rattled. Nothing fell. Yet sensors detected a vertical shift, small enough to escape human perception, but distinct enough to trigger geological alerts. At first, analysts suspected a malfunction. Instruments occasionally glitch. But then, ground-penetrating scans revealed something they were not prepared to see. A narrow fracture line running beneath the eastern retaining wall, extending deeper than any previously mapped layer. The anomaly did not follow natural fault patterns. It was straight, precise, almost geometric. When a remote microcamera was lowered into the newly revealed opening, the team expected to see soil, rubble, or compacted stone. Instead, they found a hollow space, an underground cavity no modern archaeological survey had ever documented. Smooth walls, flat surfaces, right angles where none should exist. The air inside the chamber appeared still, untouched by time. No roots, no debris, no signs of collapse. It was as if the space had remained sealed for centuries, untouched, unbothered, intentionally hidden. What unsettled investigators most was not the cavity itself, but the way it was revealed. There was no earthquake, no construction, no cause strong enough to open such a void. The rock had shifted on its own, in complete silence, exposing something that had been concealed beneath one of the holiest sites on Earth. Officials on site quickly ordered all external communication to cease. The area was cordoned off, access restricted, and within hours, satellite images of the region were quietly blurred, an action usually reserved only for military events. This was not a natural occurrence. This was not random erosion. Something beneath the Temple Mount moved, not violently, not dramatically, but deliberately at least. That is how the scientists described it privately. And the moment the cavity revealed itself, the ancient foundation, long believed unshakable, trembled for the first time in living memory. When investigators first lowered high-definition cameras into the newly exposed cavity, they expected rough natural stone or signs of ancient quarrying. Instead, the footage revealed something completely unexpected: walls that had been shaped with intention, not erosion. The chamber was far larger than the initial scans suggested. Not a narrow fissure, but a constructed space rectangular, symmetrical, and impossibly smooth for something hidden beneath 2,000 years of history. Along the lower portion of the walls, faint markings began to appear: lines, curves, intersecting symbols carved with deliberate precision. Immediately, specialists attempted to categorize them, but nothing matched. These were not Hebrew inscriptions, not Aramaic, not Greek, Latin, or Nabatean, not Canaanite, Phoenician, or any catalogued script used in the region. Even more perplexing, the symbols were carved in repeating sequences, suggesting language, not decoration. But the patterns did not align with any known linguistic structure. Some symbols were angular, like ancient runes, while others flowed like cursive strokes. They repeated in cycles, but not with the rhythm of writing systems archaeologists recognize. Then, as the camera panned across the chamber floor, something even more shocking came into view. A stone slab stood at the center, circular, perfectly cut, polished far beyond the surrounding surfaces. It was not cracked, not worn, not degraded, the way artifacts weather underground. It looked untouched, as though shielded from centuries of pressure. At its center was a groove forming a symbol that no expert could immediately identify. It was not a menorah, not a star, not a sigil linked to Judaism, Islam, or early Christianity. And yet, its placement suggested significance, perhaps even purpose. What unsettled the team the most was the silence surrounding this discovery. No ancient text or historical record describes a chamber beneath this part of the mount. No previous excavation, even those dating back to the British Mandate, ever mentioned a hollow space here. It appears in no maps, no surveys, no religious documentation. It is as if someone created this chamber with the precise intent that it remain unseen until a predetermined moment, sealed beneath layers of stone until the land itself shifted to reveal it. Authorities immediately restricted access to the footage. Several experts present at the scene were instructed to sign confidentiality agreements. And within 24 hours, international teams, geologists, linguists, and religious historians arrived in Jerusalem without any public announcement. Quietly, quickly, no press, no explanation. One archaeologist reportedly described the discovery in a whisper: "This chamber shouldn't exist. And yet, it's here." If the chamber is authentic, and if its inscriptions are as ancient as they appear, this could rewrite not only the known history of Jerusalem, but the origins of belief systems rooted in this sacred ground. And the more investigators looked, the more one question grew impossible to ignore. If someone created this chamber, what were they trying to preserve beneath the Temple Mount, protected, sealed, and hidden for millennia? Before we continue, if this kind of reflection resonates with you, consider liking this video and subscribe if you want to continue exploring these quiet questions together. When experts began analyzing the markings inside the chamber, they assumed it would take hours, maybe days, to categorize the script. But within minutes, an unsettling realization spread through the team. Nothing matched. Nothing. Not the shapes. Not the sequence. Not the rhythm of the inscriptions. Not even the direction in which the symbols were meant to be read. Normally, deciphering ancient writing follows certain rules. Languages repeat patterns. They form consistent clusters. They use spacing, alignment, and symmetry. But these symbols defied every known linguistic structure. The first clue: repetition without pattern. Some symbols repeated, but not in any consistent interval. Others appeared only once, yet were carved with extraordinary precision, far more carefully than the rest, as if meant to stand out. Linguists attempting digital reconstruction reported something almost impossible. The structure resembles language, but behaves like mathematics. Not equations, not numbers, but sequences, patterns that seem to encode ratios, not words. The second clue: geometry instead of text. As more markings were digitally enhanced, geometric alignment became visible. Curves intersecting at impossible angles, lines matching astronomical ratios, symbols aligning with cardinal directions, shapes that mirrored constellations observed from Jerusalem's sky thousands of years ago. One investigator noted the inscriptions seemed to track the position of 3 celestial bodies, but the alignment didn't match modern astronomy. It matched an ancient sky, which means the creators of this chamber encoded cosmic information no tool of their era should have been able to measure. The third clue: a symbol found nowhere else. At the center of the chamber, the circular stone slab, one symbol appeared that alarmed every expert present. It did not match any ancient alphabet. It did not match any cultic symbol. It did not match any architectural motif used on the Temple Mount or in the Second Temple period. Yet its shape was unmistakably deliberate, intersected by 3 smaller marks, each spaced with mathematical precision. It was not decorative, it was instructional. The moment of realization. When the symbols were mapped and projected onto a 3D model, everything changed. Lines inside the chamber mirrored the exact measurements of the Western Wall. Other lines mirrored the dimensions of the ancient Holy of Holies. Still others aligned with seismic fault lines beneath Jerusalem. This was not writing. This was a blueprint, a map, a warning, a message encoded in geometry, intended for a generation with the tools to finally understand it. And perhaps most unsettling of all, none of these symbols appear in any known culture associated with the Temple Mount. Not Jewish, not Roman, not Islamic, not Byzantine, not Crusader, not Ottoman. This chamber predates them all. If the symbols encode knowledge that shouldn't have existed at the time they were created, one question becomes unavoidable. Who put them there, and how did they know what modern science is only now beginning to understand? Stay with me as we turn to what comes next. As investigators descended deeper into the chamber, one detail stood out immediately. The center was not empty. Rising from the stone floor was a hexagonal platform, its edges sharply defined, its craftsmanship precise far beyond what ancient tools should allow. It did not resemble the rectangular altars found in Jewish archaeology, nor the columns of Roman design, nor the symmetry typical of Greek foundations. This shape belonged to no known architectural tradition connected to Jerusalem, and placed directly on top of that platform was the most disturbing element of all: a smooth, black stone mass, perfectly rounded, entirely out of context. Its surface absorbed light rather than reflected it. Its temperature was warmer than the surrounding rock. And most importantly, it was not native to the region. Preliminary mineral analysis shocked the team. The stone bore the composition of deep earth basalt, the type formed only under extreme pressure far below the crust. Not found in Jerusalem. Not found in Israel. Not found anywhere near the Middle East. This raised the question no one was prepared to face. Who transported a multi-ton basalt core thousands of years ago? And how? Ancient civilizations did move heavy stones, yes, but this material would have required extraction from geological depths unreachable with known ancient technology. It would have required tools, heat, and pressure far beyond what history records. And the stone showed no tool marks, no chisel lines, no fractures. It was as if it had been shaped or formed by a method lost to time. The pedestal beneath it showed no signs of erosion or replacement. It appeared designed for one purpose: to hold that stone in that exact position. Archaeologists whispered among themselves that its placement felt intentional, ceremonial, almost like a keystone. One expert said quietly, refusing to speak on camera, "This was not brought here for decoration. It was placed as a marker or a warning." But the true shock would not come from the stone itself. It would come from what was written beside it, something that should not have survived time, and something no one expected to read. For days, researchers assumed the chamber walls held only the indecipherable symbols scattered along the stone. But during a second lighting sweep, something unexpected happened. When a beam struck the hexagonal platform at a precise angle, a faint line of text appeared, almost glowing from within the stone. It was not part of the strange symbols carved across the walls. It was writing, actual writing. And unlike the other markings, this inscription could be read. At first it looked like ancient Aramaic. Others argued it resembled Paleo-Hebrew. Some insisted it was neither, but a fusion of both. Whatever it was, the translation stunned the room into silence. When the foundation trembles, the hidden one returns. Nothing more. No signature. No indication of authorship or date. Just a single sentence carved with unsettling precision, as if intended to reveal itself only when the light struck in exactly the right moment. Immediately, the debates began. The phrase, "hidden one," ignited controversy. Some scholars claimed it referred to ancient Jewish mysticism, a concealed presence believed to guard the foundations of the temple. Others connected it to prophetic language found in the book of Daniel, where truths are sealed until the time of the end, and a concealed figure emerges when appointed seasons align. A smaller, more cautious group warned that the inscription may reference something even older, a pre-temple tradition about a guardian beneath Zion, mentioned only in fragments of extra-biblical texts. But the most alarming discussion centered on the first half of the inscription. When the foundation trembles, those words immediately echoed the geological shift that exposed the chamber in the first place. The timing felt too precise, too synchronized to ignore. It seemed to describe not only a physical event, like the sudden ground settling, but a symbolic one, implying that when the base of something sacred becomes unstable, a return is triggered. Not a return by armies. Not a return by empires. But by someone referred to simply as the Hidden One. And that left experts with a problem no textbook could solve. Was the chamber predicting what had just happened? Or was the tremor itself the signal that activated a long-awaited unveiling? Either possibility sent a ripple of fear through the investigative team, and, before the debate could continue, something even more shocking happened. Silence. Not in the chamber, but above it. Within hours, the entire site was shut down. At first, the discovery spread quietly, just fragments of information exchanged among archaeologists, geologists, and a handful of academic observers who had been granted early access. But within hours of the inscription being translated, the atmosphere around the Temple Mount changed. Not publicly, not with announcements, but with silence, the kind that follows only when something has been deemed too disruptive to release. Researchers who had shared a few blurred images online suddenly disappeared from public view. Some of their posts were deleted. Others had their accounts wiped clean entirely. Emails bounced back. Phone numbers went offline. Several individuals who had worked at the site for decades reported being quietly relieved of access. For the first time in years, even long-standing maintenance crews were turned away at the gates. Then came the official statements, carefully worded and strangely identical. Israeli authorities said the area was under structural review. Waqf officials claimed they were evaluating safety concerns. No specifics. no details. No acknowledgement of the chamber or the inscription. Just the same rehearsed message repeated by every spokesperson. We are aware of activity beneath the platform and are conducting an internal assessment. But the actions told a different story. Security escalated overnight. Armed police were stationed at every entrance. Special units rotated through the site at all hours. The perimeter was sealed far beyond the usual restrictions. Drones patrolled the airspace. Ground sensors were placed around the excavation points. And the few remaining researchers were escorted everywhere they went, even to retrieve tools they had left only minutes earlier. One eyewitness quietly reported that a team of non-uniformed personnel, unaffiliated with archaeological agencies, took control of the chamber entrance. Their badges were unmarked, their purpose unspoken. The message was unmistakable. Whatever was found, it was no longer an archaeological matter. And that raised a troubling question even the experts dared not say aloud. If the discovery were harmless, if the inscription were simply historical, if the symbols were meaningless, why shut everything down so quickly? This level of silence suggested fear. Fear not of collapse, but of consequences. Something inside that chamber challenged more than geology or scholarship. It threatened narratives, stability, and control over one of the most contested pieces of ground on Earth. The silence itself became the loudest warning. But the next part reveals why authorities may be terrified of what the discovery implies. To understand why silence descended so suddenly, we have to look beyond archaeology and into the powerful intersections where religion, politics, and history collide. The Temple Mount is not just an ancient hill. It is the most contested 37 acres on Earth, spiritually, strategically, and symbolically. Any discovery beneath it has the potential to shake far more than academic conclusions. Reason 1. A discovery that challenges established narratives. If the chamber, symbols, and basalt object predate known periods of construction, then every existing timeline, Jewish, Islamic, Roman, and academic, must be re-evaluated, not revised, not expanded, rewritten. This alone is enough to spark conflict, because each tradition claims deep historical roots beneath the platform. A discovery that does not match any known era destabilizes those claims instantly. Reason 2. The inscription carries prophetic weight. The phrase etched into stone, "When the foundation trembles, the hidden one returns," is not neutral. It echoes motifs found in ancient Jewish mysticism, the prophetic language of Daniel, early Christian eschatology, apocalyptic imagery across multiple traditions. If that message is authentic and ancient, then it implies a timeline, a trigger, a moment of revelation tied to instability in the physical foundation. And considering the chamber was exposed by a literal geological shift, it suggests the appointed time referenced may already be unfolding. This interpretation terrifies authorities, because belief, especially prophetic belief, has the power to reshape nations. Reason 3. A discovery that could ignite religious conflict. If one group interprets the inscription as evidence that their prophecy is being fulfilled, rival groups may feel threatened or displaced. We have seen this pattern before, in history. A rumor, a relic. A discovery can ignite decades of unrest. This chamber is not merely historical. It is symbolic. And symbols move people faster than facts. Reason 4. Political consequences. No government can control. The Temple Mount sits at the center of a delicate political balance. One unexpected discovery, especially one hinting at divine timing, could inflame territorial claims, disrupt diplomatic agreements, trigger competing religious assertions, destabilize negotiations already under strain. No government wants to be responsible for the spark that sets off a global chain reaction. Reason 5. The fear of a message. Meant for now. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect for authorities is the timing. Thousands of years sealed, hidden, silent, revealed only when the foundation trembled. Scholars who reviewed the inscription privately acknowledged one chilling possibility. This was placed here to be found at a specific moment, not earlier, not later. And if this moment has arrived, it means history is not drifting forward randomly. It is aligning. That is the fear. Not the stone, not the symbols, not even the chamber, but the possibility that what lies beneath the Temple Mount is not a relic of the past, but a message for the present. A message no government, no authority, and no institution is prepared to explain. The chamber's discovery raises questions no one is prepared to answer. Not politicians, not religious authorities, not even the scholars who first examined the site before it was sealed. Because what has surfaced is not just an artifact, it is a pattern, and that pattern echoes a blueprint found repeatedly in Scripture. 1. The Bible speaks of hidden things, revealed in their time. Daniel 12:4 describes a message, sealed until the time of the end, meant to remain hidden until an appointed generation. Not discovered early, not forgotten late, revealed exactly when needed. The chamber beneath the Temple Mount matches this structure. Sealed, inaccessible, untouched, revealed only when the foundation shifted. This aligns with the biblical motif that certain truths emerge only when creation itself signals the moment has come. 2. A prophetic pattern of timing. Not accident. Across Scripture, major revelations occur only when the land shakes, boundaries move, foundations crack, people are forced to pay attention. The phrase carved into stone, when the foundation trembles, the hidden one returns, fits that pattern perfectly. The foundation has trembled. Something long hidden has emerged. The timing is not subtle. 3. A question of identity. Who is the hidden one? Scholars quietly raise 4 interpretations. A messianic figure referenced in ancient Jewish writings. A divine presence veiled until the appointed hour. A historical leader whose return symbolizes restoration. A metaphor for something powerful rising from concealment. Authorities fear these interpretations because each one could ignite a different global response. 4. A silence that speaks louder than announcements. Governments typically respond to archaeological discoveries with press conferences, study committees, academic discussions, but this time, nothing. Access blocked, data withheld, images erased, researchers silenced. That level of secrecy usually appears only when the implications go far beyond archaeology. 5. The possibility no one wants to admit. If the chamber was placed intentionally, if the basalt altar was transported from deep geological origins, if the inscription references a moment tied to trembling foundations, then the discovery is not just historical. It is deliberate. It is timed. And it may be pointing towards something that has not yet happened. 6. Scripture's final pattern. Silence before revelation. Throughout biblical narratives, a recurring sequence appears. A disturbance. A sign. A silence. A revelation. We are living in stage 3. The disturbance has occurred. The sign has surfaced. The silence has fallen. What comes next depends not on governments or institutions, but on what is about to be revealed. Right after the chamber beneath the Temple Mount was sealed off, An unnatural silence settled over Jerusalem. No press updates. No archaeological briefings. No leaked photographs. Everything stopped abruptly and completely. But the silence didn't last. Within hours, the geological sensors positioned around the Temple Mount devices meant to detect structural stress and minor ground movement began recording something unexpected. A series of faint tremors, small, repeating, rhythmic. Not an earthquake. Not construction. Not traffic. These vibrations did not match any known pattern. When analysts traced the source, the discovery sent shockwaves through both scientific and religious communities. Every tremor originated from the eastern side of the Temple Mount, precisely where the Golden Gate stands. The Golden Gate, known historically as the Sealed Gate, has been completely shut for centuries, blocked with stones, fortified with concrete, and left untouched by human hands. It has not opened in hundreds of years. Yet, now, something beneath it was moving. Archaeologists immediately noticed the timing. The underground chamber is exposed, and almost instantly, rhythmic tremors begin at the sealed gate. No cracking sounds. No collapsing stones. Just a subtle pulse, as if some ancient mechanism far below the surface had awakened, responding to the disturbance near the chamber. And for the first time in generations, the question echoes through Jerusalem. Is the gate stirring because the earth is shifting, or because something behind it is preparing to be revealed? To understand the weight of what's happening, we must look at the history of the Golden Gate, also known as the Eastern Gate. The very gate now showing signs of movement. The Eastern Gate sits directly opposite the Mount of Olives, forming a perfect alignment between the Temple Mount and the place where, according to Scripture, the Messiah is expected to appear. It is the only gate that faces the rising sun, symbolically tied to revelation, arrival, and divine intervention. But for nearly 500 years, it has remained completely sealed. In the 16th century, Suleiman the Magnificent ordered the gate to be closed with massive stone blocks. Some historians believe he did this for defensive purposes, but religious scholars note another reason. Local traditions warned that a divinely chosen figure would one day pass through it. Sealing the gate was seen as a way to prevent that prophecy from being fulfilled. Across Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions, the Eastern Gate carries extraordinary significance. In Jewish belief, the Messiah will enter Jerusalem through this gate when he comes. In Christian tradition, the gate will open when the appointed time has arrived, signaling a prophetic turning point. In some Islamic writings, the gate is associated with the appearance of a chosen one from the direction of the east, prompting the Ottomans to reinforce it even further. For centuries, every attempt to open, excavate, or examine this gate has failed, sometimes through political resistance, sometimes technical obstacles, and at other times due to sudden collapses, unexplained sinkage, or mysteriously halted construction. The gate has resisted time, war, weather, and human intervention. It has remained silent. Until now. The first confirmed indication that something was happening came from a source impossible to dispute: security cameras. Footage captured a subtle but measurable shift in the massive stones that seal the Eastern Gate. Not a crack, not a crumble, not erosion. The entire block appeared to have moved several millimeters as a single solid piece. That is what terrified investigators. These stones weigh several tons each. They are carved from ancient limestone, fitted so tightly that even modern machinery struggles to reposition them. And yet the footage shows no external force, no tremor, no impact. Only a silent, steady displacement, as if pressure came from within the sealed passage itself. On-site inspection revealed fresh dust scattered along the base of the gate. Not ancient residue, but newly fallen stone powder, matching the exact areas where movement occurred. This confirmed that the shift was recent, not a historical artifact or structural illusion. Even more disturbing, the timestamp of this movement aligned precisely with the unusual rhythmic vibrations recorded beneath the Temple Mount earlier. Every tremor corresponded to incremental shifts in the gate. Small, controlled, deliberate. No natural explanation fits the pattern. No earthquake was recorded. No nearby construction was underway. No weather event could have caused such uniform movement. Something moved the sealed gate from the inside. And for the first time in centuries, the silence surrounding the eastern gate is breaking. As archaeologists, geologists, and historians compared data from the newly exposed chamber with the unexpected shift of the sealed gate, a chilling pattern began to emerge. First, they overlaid the vibration logs with the exact moment the underground chamber opened. The result stunned everyone. The tremors aligned perfectly. The same rhythmic pulses detected beneath the Temple Mount, those that preceded the gate's movement, were recorded at the precise time the chamber was exposed. Not hours apart, not days, the same hour. This synchronization forced a radical hypothesis. 1. The chamber and the sealed gate may be connected underground, not by a modern tunnel, not by random geography, but by an ancient, buried system deliberately engineered beneath the Temple Mount's foundations, so deep and so secure that no record of its full structure survives. 2. The ancients may have designed both structures to respond together. This is not the kind of architectural accident that occurs over centuries. It suggests intentional design, two locations reacting to the same force, the same moment, the same trigger. 3. Ancient Jewish texts may have hinted at this. A rarely studied line in several old commentaries references a passage beneath the east, sealed until the day of shaking. Until now, scholars believed it was metaphorical. But seeing the chamber's appearance and the sealed gate's movement align so precisely has forced experts to reconsider. If the ancients built a system beneath the Temple Mount that activates only under specific conditions, and if those conditions are now being met, then the shaking beneath Jerusalem is not random. It is coordinated. It is intentional. And it is happening now. Within hours of the data becoming public, religious institutions across Jerusalem and far beyond went into immediate crisis mode. The Rabbinic Council called an emergency session. Senior rabbis, some of whom had not appeared publicly in years, were urgently summoned. Their concern was not political, but prophetic. Several members reportedly asked the same question. If the gate has moved, what force moved it? For centuries, Jewish tradition has taught that the eastern gate sealed, since the 1500s, would not open until a divinely appointed moment. Even a shift of a few millimeters was enough to trigger alarm. Islamic scholars at Al-Aqsa demanded an independent investigation. The Waqf authorities overseeing the Temple Mount immediately called for neutral experts, fearing political manipulation, or worse, a supernatural interpretation they could not control. Some scholars referenced classical Islamic texts, warning of a figure who would enter from the east when the earth trembles beneath Jerusalem. Whether symbolic or literal, the timing disturbed them. Christian leaders around the world reacted just as urgently. Priests and theologians from multiple nations issued statements urging a re-examination of prophecies concerning the Eastern Gate. Many referenced Ezekiel 44, which describes the gate being shut and reserved for the arrival of a future divine presence. One Christian leader summarized the concern. If the gate is shifting, the timeline may be shifting with it. A shared fear unites them all. Across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, despite differences in belief, One question echoed through every meeting, every discussion, every statement. If the gate has moved, what awakened it? The silence from government authorities only deepened the anxiety. Because if no human caused the shift, then the force behind it is something none of these leaders are prepared to explain. Almost immediately after the first reports circulated, the Israeli government initiated a full lockdown around the eastern perimeter of the Temple Mount. Access to the eastern zone was completely shut down. Tourists were removed. Researchers were escorted out. Even longtime Temple Mount staff were denied entry. Only authorized personnel with military clearance were allowed within the sealed perimeter. Armed special units deployed overnight. Footage taken from nearby rooftops showed heavily armed units patrolling the area from dusk until dawn. These were not standard police forces. They were elite units, usually deployed for high-risk intelligence operations. Their presence alone signaled that officials were treating the situation as something far beyond a structural concern. Security cameras went dark at the exact wrong moment. For several hours, all external surveillance feeds facing the eastern gate were mysteriously disabled. During that blackout window, according to internal logs, the gate shifted a second time. This triggered immediate speculation. Was the shutdown intentional? Or did the movement overload the system? Why did the blackout end right after the shift stopped? Authorities refused to comment. A leaked internal report added another disturbing detail. Sources inside the Antiquities Authority described a note circulated privately among high-level officials. According to the leak, underground acoustic sensors recorded a low, continuous grinding sound, consistent with stone moving against stone. Not cracking, not breaking, but grinding, as though something or someone was pushing from within. The government has released no further explanation. But when cameras fail, gates shift, and the ground itself emits sound, the silence from officials becomes the most unsettling sign of all. As news quietly spread among scholars and theologians, one scripture rose immediately to the surface. A passage thousands of years old that describes the eastern gate with uncanny specificity. Ezekiel 44:2. This gate shall remain shut. It shall not be opened, and no one shall enter by it. For the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it. For centuries, commentators believed this verse explained why the eastern gate, also called the Golden Gate, was sealed. But ancient Jewish writings add a chilling layer. Ancient commentaries contain a warning. Several early rabbinic sources state that the gate was sealed, not to keep men out, but because they feared the day it would open. In other words, the sealing was an act of restraint, a barrier placed not merely by rulers, but by divine timing. The current events mirror an old prophetic pattern. The pattern appearing now is strikingly similar to themes found throughout Scripture. Foundation trembles. Hidden things emerge. Sealed gate shifts. An appointed moment draws near. This sequence is not random. It echoes prophetic motifs where shaking precedes revealing, and revealing precedes fulfillment. The global debate intensifies. The inscription found in the underground chamber, "When the foundation trembles, the hidden one returns," is now being compared directly with Ezekiel's prophecy. And the fact that the gate shifted immediately after the chamber was exposed has sparked worldwide debate. Is this coincidence? A geological chain reaction? Or a deliberate alignment of long-sealed signs? What began as archaeological curiosity has now become a theological flashpoint, because if the prophetic pattern is real, the next phase may already be unfolding beneath the Temple Mount. A team of Tel Aviv University physicists and archaeologists succeeded in jamming a large device into an underground cavern outside of the old city of Jerusalem in 2023. With the help of ropes and pulleys, the researchers lowered the large device, made up of layers of metal components, linked together by tangled wires, tubes, ribbons, and clamps, into the cavern. It was probably the last thing that anyone would expect to find in such a place, as it resembled a time machine that had been deposited 3,000 years ago. It might as well have been. The muon detector was used to discover secret passageways that led to the city's main water source in ancient times, and to accomplish the task without having to lift a shovel. As Professor Oded Lipschitz, Director of Ancient Israel Studies at the university, explained, all ancient cities needed a water supply and fortified, secret ways to get to there in case of emergency or war. Lipschitz is one of 4 coordinators of a project to map the tunnels, chambers, and canals underneath Jerusalem. The muon device was developed by a team of archaeologists at Tel Aviv University and was designed to capture and register the angular distribution of muons, tiny yet powerful subatomic particles that are created when cosmic rays smash into the Earth's atmosphere. Muons are similar to electrons, but are much heavier and often exhibit wave-like properties due to their quantum nature. Using particle physics to examine underground areas that are covered by multiple layers of ancient settlements and which are also of significance to various religions is a very daunting, if not impossible, task. Professor Lipschitz refers to the method as muon radiography and believes the technique could shed light on what life was like in Jerusalem thousands of years ago by identifying and visualizing underground structures and artifacts that are not visible to the naked eye or traditional archaeological methods. It can also be used to reveal fortifications from very early times, as well as tombs and spaces that might have been carved out to help the city's early residents continue to have access to water during enemy sieges. The university researchers noted that this method will allow them to virtually leave no stone unturned, as it does not disturb people or buildings above ground. One project coordinator, Professor Erez Etzion, from the School of Physics and Astronomy, said, "It is our dream to scan underground in a search for tunnels that might lead us to the Temple Mount. The muon detectors can provide us with tools to search underground passively. One of the large muon detection devices has been positioned near the Gihon Spring, while a second device is being installed at the stone-stepped structure, a large wall in the city of David, dating back approximately 3,000 years. The site lies halfway between the Gihon Spring and the Temple Mount, marking the lowest point on the eastern slope of the city of David. In addition, it includes the Silwan neighborhood, positioned to the south of the Temple Mount, in an area that archaeologists deem as the oldest section of Jerusalem with direct ties to biblical times. The researchers intend to point the muon detectors toward the Temple Mount in the hope that they can detect tunnels or other underground spaces running between the area that cannot be excavated toward the spring. As a historian, I believe it's important to understand our history, and points out, the city of David is the most important site for all 3 of the world's monotheistic religions, said Professor Lipschitz. Because muon particles travel nearly at the speed of light and are almost unstoppable, as they can penetrate just about anything, including solid rock. The detector must be placed below the target area and angled correctly to analyze the rate of muons passing through whatever is being studied. Professor Etzion explained the significance of the detector's placement. As the muons are coming from the sky, you need to place the detector in a spot that is lower than the screened region to see if there is any deviation in the ground between that detector and the surface. If the detector receives more muons than expected, it means that, for at least part of their underground journey, the particles didn't travel through matter, but through an empty cavity. Archaeologists suspect that many tunnels were dug from the Temple Mount to the Gihon Spring, the main source of water, allowing water to be accessed during times of siege. Tel Aviv University archaeologist, Professor Yuval Gadot, said many parts of ancient Jerusalem are unexplored archaeologically, including the Temple Mount, which is revered by Muslims as the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, as well as the city of David, most of which is now covered by the modern-day Palestinian village of Silwan and has itself become a flashpoint in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Underground passages and tunnels were a cardinal component in Jerusalem's political life. And so far we have explored the spaces located by the spring, but there are many more tunnels that were exploited by the ancient elites of Jerusalem for all sorts of reasons, said Gadot. There are questions, for example, as to whether and how the Temple Mount and the Ophel, the area between the city of David and the southern edge of the Temple Mount, which is rich in monumental remains from the First Temple period, were connected to the Gihon in order to supply those areas with water. Muons could reveal secret passages connecting those spots, Gadot said. These unknown spaces that might have been used in order to connect the city's different quarters lie beyond our reach, he added. Getting to know them will change our understanding of how the city evolved and functioned. The initiative is not without its challenges. For example, archaeological digs in and around the Silwan neighborhood remain a frequent source of tension, especially now, as those tensions are being fueled by the Ir David Foundation, the right-wing NGO that runs the City of David Archaeological Park and supports Jewish settlement in the area. As muon imaging research in Jerusalem is still in its infancy, Etzion and Gadot said their current project, with single detectors placed in different locations, will only return a flat, 2D image of any void that is between them and the surface. The researchers believe an array of some 50 detectors at different locations would be more effective in triangulating the data and creating a reliable 3D map of the underground. However, with the cost of a muon detector at $100,000 apiece, the scientific archaeological project has its challenges, and it remains to be seen whether enough funding can be secured to do so. The Golden Gate is very much in the news today, as it has become a point of conflict between Jews and Muslims, or Palestinians and Israelis. But what do we know about this gate? The Golden Gate, around which swirl various traditions, is the most intriguing of all the gates of the Temple Mount. In Jewish tradition, it is through this gate, Sha'ar HaRakamim, Gate of Mercy, blocked since the 9th century, that Messiah will enter at the end of days, led in by the prophet Elijah. This is based on the prophecy of Ezekiel 44.13. Christians believe that Christ made his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, recorded in all 4 of the Gospels. Through this gate, on the Sunday before his crucifixion, Palm Sunday. By riding on a donkey, he fulfilled the messianic prophecy recorded in Zechariah 9.9. Muslims refer to it as the Gate of Eternity, Bab al-Dahariyeh, and believe it will be an important part of the last judgment of mankind. The Muslim cemetery along the eastern wall is thought to have been placed there in the belief that the forerunner of Messiah, Elijah, being of a priestly family, could not pass through the Golden Gate, thus preventing the coming of the Messiah. Some claim that the Golden Gate was built by the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius after the expulsion of the Sasanians from Jerusalem. However, the absence in the architectural decorations of any Christian symbols, such as a cross, makes that difficult to believe. There are actually 4 distinct historical phases represented in the architecture of this gate: Turkish, Umayyad, Herodian, and First Temple period. In the 1970s, I was privileged to spend 1 week inside this gate, measuring and recording its plan, and drawing accurate elevations of all the interior surfaces. The Golden Gate's outer facade is composed of two blocked-up gateways adorned with intricately carved relief arches. The decoration of the arches to the front and back of the gate are identical to the applied arches of the double gate, which date from the early Islamic period. The gate appears therefore to have been rebuilt in the Umayyad period, on the foundations of an earlier gate. The gateposts and the two masonry sections appear therefore to be part of the same construction. The top of the southern gatepost is level with the top of the ancient masonry that can be seen south of the Golden Gate. The northern gatepost is one stone course higher and is located only one stone course below the surface of the Temple Mount. This means that the top of the original lintel would have been identical with the present-day level of the Temple Mount. The two gateposts belong to a gate that dates from the First Temple period and is most likely the Shushan Gate, mentioned in Mishnah Midot 1.3 as the only gate in the eastern wall. The gate most probably was given this name by builders who had returned from exile in Babylon and for whom the palace of Shushan lived on in their memories. However, if so, there would have been a tradition of an eastern gate in this location from the time of the construction of the original eastern wall. It seems reasonable to suggest that the central section of the eastern wall dates from the First Temple period, in particular to the time of King Hezekiah. This square mount was extended south in the Hasmonean period, while both the southern and northern additions were made by King Herod the Great. In 1969, the remains of an underground arch were discovered inside a grave in front of the Golden Gate. It was suggested that this may have been a pre-Herodian gateway. However, as the arch stones appear to be Herodian, it is more reasonable to suggest that this arch was part of a Herodian staircase leading up to the original gate. It is fascinating to contemplate that the stairway may still be intact under this gate, although hidden from sight by the Muslim cemetery. We do know that the remains of an ancient city wall lie under the present-day path that runs through the Muslim cemetery, which was discovered by Warren in the 1860 seconds. The above-mentioned arched stairway led down through a gate in this city wall, the so-called Mifkad muster, or inspection, gate mentioned in Nehemiah 3.31, apparently still in use in the Second Temple period. During the latter period, it was through these gates that the red heifer was led out from the Temple Mount to the Mount of Olives, Mishnah, Para. On the Day of Atonement, the scapegoat was led by the same route into the wilderness. Mishnah, Yoma, I'm away this week. So here's one more LOTL remastered to tide you over until I return. A tour guide shouldn't let the facts get in the way of a good story is an oft-heard mantra, but I'm not sure that it's true. Sometimes the facts offer an even better story, or at least a more important one. That's certainly the case with Jerusalem's Gate of Mercy, Sha'ar HaRahamim in Hebrew, and Bab al-Rahma in Arabic, also known as the Golden Gate. Located on the eastern side of the Temple Mount, Haram al-Sharif, and best observed from the Mount of Olives, it's been sealed since the medieval era, with many guides today claiming this was done by Muslim rulers to prevent the Messiah's entry. This, in turn, reflects the story of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, which many inaccurately claim was via the Golden Gate and Jewish traditions, drawing on Ezekiel, that the Messiah will enter Jerusalem from the east. The story never made much sense to me. Even though the Messiah isn't a superhero, I always found the idea that a single blocked gate would stop him rather unconvincing. Now, in an article in the Journal of Islamic Studies, The Gate of Mercy as a Contested Monument, Jerusalem's Sealed Gate as a Muslim Site of Memory, Dr. Christiane Marie Abu Sarah has convincingly debunked the myth. While Josephus noted the presence of an eastern gate in the 1st century, the current gate is thought to have been built during the Umayyad period. The original eastern gate, possibly known as the Shushan Gate, that Jesus would have used is believed to have been further south. A double gate with 2 bays opening into an interior vestibule, with a pair of small domes lining the ceiling of the inner walls. You can see images of the gate's interior here. Abu Sarah notes that the dimensions are homologous to the Dome of the Rock, with Syro-Palestinian-style rosette-adorned friezes that correspond to its marble friezes. On the other side of the gate is an Islamic cemetery that also dates to the Umayyad era, when the Dome of the Rock was built. It houses the tombs of Ubadah ibn al-Samit and Shaddad ibn Aus, who were companions of Muhammad. The gate seems to have been built as way to access the cemetery from the Haram al-Sharif, referring to the nearby Dome of the Chain, and earlier Jewish traditions. Early Muslim chroniclers described the gate as a place of penitence in preparation for judgment. By the 10th century, amidst an increase in apocalyptic traditions, local Muslims began connecting the gate to a verse in the Quran, 57-13. A wall will be put between them, with a gate therein. Inside it will be mercy, al-Rahmah, and outside it will be torment, al-Adab. Abu Sarah quotes David Cook, who writes in Studies in Muslim Apocalyptic. Without a doubt, to attach a tradition to a Quranic verse, or vice versa, was the ultimate way to ensure that a tradition was accepted. The next shift came in the Mamluk era, when the scholar Ibn Kathir, who was conspicuously hostile towards Judaism, argued that the link between the Quran and the Gate of Mercy was false, and the result of local residents using Jewish traditions and fabrications. He specifically mentions Ka'b al-Ahbar, a famous 7th century Jewish convert to Islam. Responding to Ibn Kathir, Abu Sarah writes, "Notable here is that Ibn Kathir is concerned with the purity of tradition, but scholars have shown that hybridity was in fact intrinsic to Islam and Christianity. Supersessionist memory programs by nature involved building on prior traditions and shared Muslim, Jewish, Christian sites, saints, rituals, and prayers were common in the late antique and medieval Mediterranean. I would put this less diplomatically. Islam, like Christianity before it, believed it had replaced Judaism and Christianity, but never threw off what Harold Bloom, in a very different context, called the anxiety of influence. This is why the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa were viewed by many Muslims as the Third Temple, and why medieval traditions about the Gate of Mercy drew on the Midrash when they described Solomon harvesting precious metals from trees of gold and silver. Today, a common word for this kind of practice is appropriation. While this is an anachronistic way of describing medieval syncretism, it's important to acknowledge the genealogy of this hybridity, which isn't simply the result of some kind of benevolent neutrality. Why, then, was the gate closed? One theory, mostly rejected, is that it happened after the 747 earthquake that damaged the southern Umayyad palace. However, the first Muslim source confirming its closure was in 1165-6. It's more likely, though we'll probably never know for certain, that it was closed along with other gates and domes during the Fatimid period to make room for a zawiyah, a residence for Muslim scholars, ascetics. By the Crusader period, following the earlier apocalyptic associations, a tradition emerged that the gate would be shut until the final judgment. Nobody, though, claimed that this was part of a plot to prevent the Messiah's entry. Christians only began offering this explanation in the 1800s, citing Ezekiel 44:1-3. Then he brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, which faces east, and it was shut. The Lord said to me, This gate shall remain shut, it shall not be opened, and no one shall enter by it. For the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered by it. Therefore it shall remain shut. Only the prince, because he is a prince, may sit in it to eat food before the Lord. He shall enter by way of the vestibule of the gate, and shall go out by the same way. A PEF lecture series spread this message, while key figures like Thomas Cook and Lawrence Oliphant also amplified it. Ironically, Jerusalem Palestinians shared the belief that Jesus would return and save the world, drawing on the Dome of the Rock inscriptions which, while rejecting his divinity, bless Jesus and anticipate his return. As Abu Sarah writes, the rumors should also be understood as part of a long tradition of Christian imperial apocalypticism, now revamped as a new imperial myth in the making about the inevitability of a European takeover of the Holy Land in the face of Ottoman weakness. As one British writer stated, the Arabs walled up this gate because of a prophecy that when the Christians take the city, they will enter through that gate. I think they are foolish to suppose a few stones will defeat the prophecy, as if the Christian nations could not enter the city whenever and wherever they choose. The notion that the gate was blocked to prevent the Messiah's return remains a popular myth to this day. As Abu Sarah notes, it has also been dragged into the maelstrom of the wider conflict over the Temple Mount Haram al-Sharif, which includes the increasingly prevalent Muslim denial of the Jewish temple's existence, and has even been published in several reputable guidebooks. This should always be resisted. The pursuit of truth should power our understanding of the land's history, irrespective of the wider political implications, even at the expense of a good story. The Temple Mount has always held mysteries, stories of hidden rooms, forbidden tunnels, and lost relics buried deep beneath its foundation. Most believed these tales were symbolic, exaggerated, or impossible to verify. Until now. Right from the shadows of the Temple Mount, a recent, unexpected geological shift exposed an underground cavity no modern record had ever documented. What investigators found inside did not match any known era, language, or architectural style. And for the first time in decades, authorities have gone silent. But here's the question. Does this incredible find confirm the biblical narrative? Before we continue, hit the like and subscribe to follow what unfolds next. For centuries, the foundation of the Temple Mount has been considered immovable. An ancient platform carved from bedrock so dense and solid that even major earthquakes in the region left it largely untouched. That is why what happened just days ago has stunned both scientists and religious authorities. Shortly before sunrise, monitoring stations around Jerusalem recorded a brief, silent fluctuation beneath the mount. It was not a quake. No tremor was felt on the surface. Nothing rattled. Nothing fell. Yet sensors detected a vertical shift, small enough to escape human perception, but distinct enough to trigger geological alerts. At first, analysts suspected a malfunction. Instruments occasionally glitch. But then, ground-penetrating scans revealed something they were not prepared to see. A narrow fracture line running beneath the eastern retaining wall, extending deeper than any previously mapped layer. The anomaly did not follow natural fault patterns. It was straight, precise, almost geometric. When a remote microcamera was lowered into the newly revealed opening, the team expected to see soil, rubble, or compacted stone. Instead, they found a hollow space, an underground cavity no modern archaeological survey had ever documented. Smooth walls, flat surfaces, right angles where none should exist. The air inside the chamber appeared still, untouched by time. No roots, no debris, no signs of collapse. It was as if the space had remained sealed for centuries untouched, unbothered, intentionally hidden. What unsettled investigators most was not the cavity itself, but the way it was revealed. There was no earthquake, no construction, no cause strong enough to open such a void. The rock had shifted on its own, in complete silence, exposing something that had been concealed beneath one of the holiest sites on Earth. Officials on site quickly ordered all external communication to cease. The area was cordoned off, access restricted, and within hours, satellite images of the region were quietly blurred, an action usually reserved only for military events. This was not a natural occurrence. This was not random erosion. Something beneath the Temple Mount moved, not violently, not dramatically, but deliberately at least. That is how the scientists described it privately. And the moment the cavity revealed itself, the ancient foundation, long believed unshakable, trembled for the first time in living memory. When investigators first lowered high-definition cameras into the newly exposed cavity, they expected rough natural stone or signs of ancient quarrying. Instead, the footage revealed something completely unexpected: walls that had been shaped with intention, not erosion. The chamber was far larger than the initial scans suggested. Not a narrow fissure, but a constructed space, rectangular, symmetrical, and impossibly smooth for something hidden beneath 2,000 years of history. Along the lower portion of the walls, faint markings began to appear: lines, curves, intersecting symbols carved with deliberate precision. Immediately, specialists attempted to categorize them, but nothing matched. These were not Hebrew inscriptions, not Aramaic, not Greek, Latin, or Nabatean, not Canaanite, Phoenician, or any catalogued script used in the region. Even more perplexing, the symbols were carved in repeating sequences, suggesting language, not decoration. But the patterns did not align with any known linguistic structure. Some symbols were angular, like ancient runes, while others flowed like cursive strokes. They repeated in cycles, but not with the rhythm of writing systems archaeologists recognize. Then, as the camera panned across the chamber floor, something even more shocking came into view. A stone slab stood at the center, circular, perfectly cut, polished far beyond the surrounding surfaces. It was not cracked, not worn, not degraded, the way artifacts weather underground. It looked untouched, as though shielded from centuries of pressure. At its center was a groove forming a symbol that no expert could immediately identify. It was not a menorah, not a star, not a sigil linked to Judaism, Islam, or early Christianity. And yet, its placement suggested significance, perhaps even purpose. What unsettled the team the most was the silence surrounding this discovery. No ancient text or historical record describes a chamber beneath this part of the mount. No previous excavation, even those dating back to the British Mandate, ever mentioned a hollow space here. It appears in no maps, no surveys, no religious documentation. It is as if someone created this chamber with the precise intent that it remain unseen until a predetermined moment, sealed beneath layers of stone until the land itself shifted to reveal it. Authorities immediately restricted access to the footage. Several experts present at the scene were instructed to sign confidentiality agreements. And within 24 hours, international teams, geologists, linguists, and religious historians arrived in Jerusalem without any public announcement. Quietly, quickly, no press, no explanation. One archaeologist reportedly described the discovery in a whisper: "This chamber shouldn't exist. And yet, it's here." If the chamber is authentic, and if its inscriptions are as ancient as they appear, this could rewrite not only the known history of Jerusalem, but the origins of belief systems rooted in this sacred ground. And the more investigators looked, the more one question grew impossible to ignore. If someone created this chamber, what were they trying to preserve beneath the Temple Mount, protected, sealed, and hidden for millennia? Before we continue, if this kind of reflection resonates with you, consider liking this video and subscribe if you want to continue exploring these quiet questions together. When experts began analyzing the markings inside the chamber, they assumed it would take hours, maybe days, to categorize the script. But within minutes, an unsettling realization spread through the team. Nothing matched. Nothing. Not the shapes. Not the sequence. Not the rhythm of the inscriptions. Not even the direction in which the symbols were meant to be read. Normally, deciphering ancient writing follows certain rules. Languages repeat patterns. They form consistent clusters. They use spacing, alignment, and symmetry. But these symbols defied every known linguistic structure. The first clue: repetition without pattern. Some symbols repeated, but not in any consistent interval. Others appeared only once, yet were carved with extraordinary precision, far more carefully than the rest, as if meant to stand out. Linguists attempting digital reconstruction reported something almost impossible. The structure resembles language, but behaves like mathematics. Not equations, not numbers, but sequences, patterns that seem to encode ratios, not words. The second clue: geometry instead of text. As more markings were digitally enhanced, geometric alignment became visible. Curves intersecting at impossible angles. Lines matching astronomical ratios. Symbols aligning with cardinal directions. Shapes that mirrored constellations observed from Jerusalem's sky thousands of years ago. One investigator noted the inscriptions seemed to track the position of 3 celestial bodies, but the alignment didn't match modern astronomy. It matched an ancient sky, which means the creators of this chamber encoded cosmic information no tool of their era should have been able to measure.